It didn't start with the breaking news alert. It started with a phone call, 3 minutes before the world found out. On an ordinary morning, in a quiet coastal home, a man who had lived nearly a century picked up the phone, and everything changed. The voice on the other end wasn't calm. It wasn't composed. It was shaken, urgent, almost unrecognizable. And what was said in that moment would unravel a story that had been hidden for years, a story no one wanted to face. Because from the outside, this family looked untouchable. To the public, he was a visionary, a storyteller, a man who built worlds that made people laugh, cry, and believe. But to those who knew him best, he was something much simpler. He was a son, he was a father, and he was a man who loved too much. That's where this story really begins. Long before the headlines, there was a child running through studio sets, watching his father create magic. He grew up surrounded by laughter, by timing, by the rhythm of storytelling. He learned that family was everything. And maybe that was the problem. Because years later, that same devotion, the same unwavering love, would become the very thing that destroyed him. The man on the phone that morning didn't need to explain much. The silence between his words said enough. Something terrible had happened. Not sudden, not random, inevitable. For years, whispers had circulated behind closed doors. Not scandals, not gossip, something heavier, something people didn't want to name out loud. Trouble at home, but not the kind you fix with time or patience. This was different. At first, it was easy to ignore. Small incidents, raised voices, a broken object here, an uncomfortable silence there. The kind of things people dismiss because the truth feels too big to confront. But over time, it escalated. Friends noticed the change. The once vibrant, passionate man began to fade. Conversations shifted. He stopped talking about his work, his ideas, his future. Instead, he asked strange, heavy questions. Questions about legacy, about responsibility, about whether love can ever go too far. One afternoon, sitting across from a lifelong friend, his hand trembled slightly as he spoke. "Tell me," he asked quietly, "how do you stop loving your own child?" There was no answer. Because what do you say to that? If this story is hitting you in any way, if it reminds you of someone or something you've seen but couldn't quite explain, share this with someone who might need to hear it today. Sometimes, stories like this aren't just stories. They're warnings. Back then, though, no one saw it clearly enough. Or maybe they did and chose not to act. Because respect can be dangerous. Respect for privacy. Respect for dignity. Respect for a man who had always handled his own battles. So they stayed back, even when the signs grew louder. One close friend later admitted that he had been inside that house days before everything fell apart. He had gone under the excuse of work. But really, he went to check if things were okay. They weren't. There were arguments. Intense ones. The kind that leave a mark even after the shouting stops. The kind that make you feel like you've stepped into a storm with no clear exit. There was fear in that house. But still, the door remained open. Because the man at the center of it all believed he could fix it. That love would be enough. It always had been before. Except this time, love wasn't healing anything. It was being used. Manipulated. Twisted. Exploited. Money disappeared into endless attempts to solve the problem. Treatments, lawyers, second chances. Again and again. Each time with hope. Each time ending the same way. Like pouring everything you have into a black hole that never gives anything back. And still, he didn't walk away. Because to him, walking away wasn't an option. Not from his own blood. The truth is, he wasn't afraid for himself. He was afraid of what would happen if he let go. Afraid his child would fall and never get back up. So he held on tighter. Even as everything around him began to collapse. His partner saw it too. She tried to keep things together, to hold the pieces in place. But even the strongest people have limits. And over time, the exhaustion began to show. The laughter faded. The light in her voice dimmed. The strength she carried started to crack. They had a plan, eventually. A quiet one. They were going to leave. Just the two of them. Start over somewhere else. Away from the chaos. Away from the pressure. It wasn't giving up, it was survival. They had even started packing. But they never made it out. Because the moment that plan became real, everything changed. The safety net was disappearing. The support that had always been there was about to vanish. And for someone who had grown dependent on it, that was unacceptable. What happened next wasn't a sudden explosion. It was the final step in a long, tragic chain of events. When the news finally broke, it spread fast. Shock, disbelief, confusion. But for those who knew the full story, there was something else. A terrible, crushing realization. This didn't come out of nowhere. It had been building for years. And maybe, just maybe, it could have been stopped. In the days that followed, the man who received that early phone call disappeared from the public eye. He didn't speak, didn't comment, didn't try to explain. He just sat with it, surrounded by memories of a different time. A better time. Photos of laughter, of friendship, of a boy who once had nothing but a big heart and a bright future. When he finally spoke, his voice carried something heavier than grief. Guilt. We saw it, he admitted. We all saw it. And we told ourselves it wasn't our place. That silence, that hesitation, it cost everything. He didn't describe the end in detail. He didn't need to. What mattered wasn't how it happened. It was why. Because this wasn't just about one moment of violence. It was about years of ignored warnings. Years of love being mistaken for solution. Years of hoping things would change, instead of accepting they wouldn't. In one of his final reflections, he said something that stayed with everyone who heard it. He didn't lose his life that day, he said quietly. He lost it piece by piece, long before that. And maybe that's the hardest part to accept. That sometimes, the danger isn't sudden. It's slow. It's quiet. It hides behind excuses, behind loyalty, behind love. Until one day, there's nothing left to save. Now, the house stands silent. Flowers line the entrance. Messages of love and grief pile up outside. But inside, there's only emptiness. A space where a family once fought to hold on. And lost. The story will continue. There will be investigations, reports, headlines. People will argue over details, over blame, over justice. But none of that will change the core truth. A man loved his child more than anything. And in the end, that love became the very thing that destroyed him. So if there's anything to take from this, anything at all, it's this. Love is powerful, but it isn't always enough. And sometimes, the bravest thing a person can do is let go. If this story stayed with you, if it made you think, feel, or see something differently, take a moment to like the video, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Because stories like this aren't just meant to be watched. They're meant to be understood.